Hello everybody and welcome to a video on how to replace glass within a natural spaces dome skylight. We're going to just start out by looking at a couple general maintenance things. You can see there's caulking in the corner. This is an older skylight unit, so it has Phillips headed screws, which these are stainless steel. They're a little soft. We now use T25s, and we recommend that when replacing this you put new screws with washers. You saw that screw down there. The old ones like this shows sometimes had nails in there, and those nails could eventually let water into leaks, so now we put screws in there. So those are just some things to look for as you're getting ready to replace the glass that you can maybe do to ensure that your frame stays in good shape. Josh is cutting the silicone corners that we were just showing before. We just cut those ahead of time as it makes it a little easier to take off the top cap. The top cap is the piece he's pulling the screws out of now. And it's an extruded aluminum piece, and the screws put pressure down on the top cap, which compresses a butyl tape that you'll see here in a second, and that's what actually gives you the seal. On the one on the left, you may have noticed he had left the top screw and the bottom screw in place. Sometimes it's nice to leave one top cap piece on a little bit just so that the glass unit does not fall out on you. Typically it's very stuck in there. As you can see, the butyl tape as Josh is pulling this away is very sticky. So normally the glass will not just fall out, but if the frame is in real bad shape or something, it can happen. So we like to leave one piece in there with a couple of screws just to make sure that does not happen. Now Josh is using a Wonder Bar here to kind of pry the top cap off. I only use that if it's absolutely necessary, as this is tempered glass and the metal from anything that hits the very edge of the glass can shatter it. So it's a little risky to use this. Also, you don't want to kink the flashing on the edge, the outside edge underneath the top cap. So if you have to use it, you got to kind of be careful that you're not touching the glass edge or the outside edge of the flashing, or you may kink it, and then when you put the new piece on, it's just cosmetically it looks a little bad. Here he's labeling them. He's putting a little star on the top corner. That's the A side of this window. It's an AAB. This one he's labeling as the base. It's nice to do that because sometimes you'll have two pieces that may be almost identical, and if you don't get them in the right spot, the old screw holes may not line up perfectly with the drilled holes in your top cap. So it's just a good habit to label those to make sure that everything goes right back on the way it came off, and you're not trying to figure it out sometimes when you're standing up on a ladder. This one's nice because he's working from the ground, but many times you're up on the roof, so it's just nice to have everything marked so you can put it right back where it goes. Again, you can see he's getting the Wonder Bar in there just to get it started. Once he gets it started, and again being careful not to touch the glass or the edge of the frame so you don't kink the flashing, then he tries to remove most of it by hand if possible. Now you don't want to pull so hard that you bend and kink the extruded aluminum. It can bend a little bit and be bent back flat again if you know, you're pulling on it a little bit and it bends a little. As long as you don't kink it, you can kind of bend it back almost exactly how it was, so it's not a real big deal. You just don't want to yank on it and bend it to the point where now you have a kink in that extruded aluminum. So again, he's marking this one. This is also A because it's an AAB window, but he's showing that X shows that that's the top corner. He's going to pull the glass unit out now that he has the top cap off. So he's just kind of cleaning it to put suction cup on. You do not want to put it in the middle though. You want to put it on one corner. If you put it in the middle, you're essentially trying to pull it out from all three sides at once. If you put it on one of the corners, you can kind of peel it out of there, which is much easier. It's almost impossible if your tape sealant's in good shape and your frame is in good shape to pull it out from the middle. So he's trying to pull, but you can see it's not coming out. Sometimes you need to go to the inside and cut that tape sealant a little bit as well. Not all the time, but sometimes. Again, if your window's in real good shape, or your skylight's in real good shape, I mean, you will definitely want to cut that, as it's going to be very tough to pull out, and you may separate the panes. Now this unit is shot. You can see the fogging in between the panes, so we're not trying to salvage this unit. But maybe if you're taking out the glass unit for some other reason, maybe the frame was bad and your glass unit was good, you don't want to yank the glass too hard because you may separate and create a gap in between those panes, and then it'll fog up like this one did. So here he's peeling it out. You can see he kind of pulls from the top. I'm on the inside pushing a little bit to help. Now he's repositioning the cup so that once he gets it completely out, he's got a little more balance just to carry it a little easier. I'm running outside here to kind of help him with that too. Now when you get to the bottom, it's easier to kick one corner out like he did the left corner there and then slide it out. Sometimes when you try to pull it out from the bottom, the two corners can get a little tight in there. So, but that's about it. You just essentially get that top cap removed, pull off all the tape sealant, and then you're ready to pull the glass unit out. Here he's just pulling the tape sealant from the frame itself. So you do have it on the frame and the outside of the frame. The inside of the frame prevents condensation from getting into the glass unit, and the outside, of course, is protecting it from water and stuff like that. So here's the new tape sealant he's putting in place. The newer frames have a little tiny channel routed into them for the tape sealant to go into. The older frames don't, but typically he's a little close to the inside edge. I like to keep it back about 1/8 of an inch or so from the inside edge, and then that way when you compress it and you tighten those screws and it kind of flattens out, put some pressure on that tape sealant, it's not bulging to the inside very much. So just a little, 1/8 inch back from the inside edge is about perfect. Another thing you want to do when you're applying the tape sealant is you do not want to pull it tight. It will stretch. It will be able to stretch. It has a rubber rod on the inside of it, and it's kind of a tarry butyl material on the surrounding this rod. So you can stretch it, and the problem is if you pull it tight and you keep a nice clean straight line, it looks good, but then it will start to pull itself back together and it will shrink a little bit. So the goal is to get it in place without pulling it tight, just to have it just kind of roll it in place. So now he's putting on the bottom one. So you can see what he's doing here is he is overlapping the corner. But you can't overlap it too much because in the center of this butyl tape piece there is a small rubber poly shim, they call it. It's essentially like a little rubber rod that goes in the middle of this. So when you get the corner together, you want it together like that so you don't get air leakage in that corner. But you do not want the two rods to sit on top of each other. So you really only overlap it about halfway into the other one so that the rods butt up next to each other, and you'll be able to fill the rods in there. You just don't want them overlapping, or else now you have a little high spot with the rods that are compressing versus them just laying flat. But obviously the butyl material that's around it, you can seal that corner up still good with that. So again, he's not pulling on this gasket material, and you do not want to be short with this because you do not want to splice in it. In fact, you cannot have a splice in it except for in the corners. So it's good to leave it a little long and trim it once you get to the corner, because if you cut it too short, you have to throw that piece away and start over. So here he's got the bottom in place, and he's got that corner sealed up. And you can kind of see where he's going with it. So the third piece he'll put in there, same thing. He wants to get that corner sealed up, but not too far. So he's making sure that the two internal poly shim rods do not lay on top of each other, but the one butts into the other. But you can see the butyl tape still creates a good seal. And that seal is critical because if you have a small gap in there, you'll be able to get warm, moist air in the wintertime. In this case, this is up in Minnesota. You'll get warm, moist air inside your house going into this cold frame that's sitting outside and condensing, getting water condensation in the frame, and that can eventually lead to it rotting and different things. So you want these corners sealed up very good to ensure that there's no airflow going into the window cavity from inside your home. And obviously it's the same from outside. You don't want any airflow in there as well as the liquid water, of course, from rain and stuff. You don't want to get it in there, but we don't even want air to be able to move through this. So again, he's just making sure that upper corner sealed up real nice so that there's no air able to get through there. The poly shim rods are not stacked, they're just close to each other. You'll notice there's a little green sticker by his hand that just says this side in, or glass side in, meaning when you buy a glass unit, there'll be low E coatings, there'll be tints on them sometimes. So one side is designed for the inside, one side is designed for the outside. So of course you want to make sure that the little sticker, I usually leave it on there until the whole thing's installed so you don't accidentally flip it around here or there and not be sure which side goes in. So he's got the glass side in going towards the inside like he should. He put down the a couple rubber spacers there you probably saw, and you do not want it to touch that poly shim tape until you are ready and it's lined up. As soon as it touches the glass, it's stuck there. So you can see how he balanced both sides before he tipped it back into it, just to make sure that the glass was centered good, because once he lays it back into the frame and it touches that butyl tape, if he was off and he has to pull the glass back out, it's going to pull that tape off. It's going to make a mess. You're probably going to have to throw all that tape away and start all over. So you want to spend a good, extra minute here just making sure it's all centered before you push it up against that tape. The glass manufacturer likes to see about a 1/4 inch gap around the glass in the frame. What he's got here are just some little plastic tools that allow you to push a little bit against the glass in the frame to create a little space to put a spacer in there. Typically, you can reuse all the spacers that were in there when you pulled out your original piece of glass. They never go bad, they're just solid pieces of rubber. So there you can see he's got it all centered and the spaces in it, and now he's starting to clean up the top cap. The good thing about that poly shim, it's very sticky. It's a little bit of a pain to work with, but it typically comes off stuff pretty good. That rubber poly shim rod that's in the middle of it kind of helps hold it together and allows you just to peel it off as he's doing here. So he's just going to clean up the 3 pieces of top cap and get them ready for the new poly shim tape. Here he's taking his knife, and with the silicone caulking in the corner, he's making sure to get that cleaned off. Silicone does not bond with silicone very well. So when you clean off these corners, you want to get it down to the metal. As you can see here, he's getting a little more detailed. In a perfect situation, there's even some chemicals. MEK is one of the chemicals you can use to really get that clean. In a perfect world, you'll have it down to bare metal so that the silicone really bonds well to the metal, and there's not a thin layer of silicone that it's not going to bond well to, impeding its ability to have a long-term seal there. So now he's putting back on the new poly shim butyl tape. Again, he's making sure not to stretch it, not to pull on it, just to kind of lay it in place and arrange it. You can see there's a little channel in there. I get a close-up of it later, but there's a little channel that he's lining the tape up in the middle of, which essentially you can see the little channel right there. That's where that little poly shim rubber tubing in the middle of this is going to be able to lay. So you can almost see it on the edge there, that little poly shim in the middle. So that lines up in the middle so that when you compress it, the little poly shim rod essentially gets embedded in that little channel. And then there's a lot of little tiny grooves on each side of the channel that really grab onto the butyl tape and kind of keep it in place from sagging out. So here he's lining it up. He's not pushing the butyl tape to the frame yet, or else it's going to stick wherever it is. So he's using a screw up on the top and a screw on the bottom to kind of make sure it's all lined up right. And once he feels confident that it's where it's supposed to be and all those screw holes are going to line up, he pushes it against it. And you can see the butyl tape already kind of sticks and binds it in place. So without those 2 screws, he's just kind of guessing. He's not tightening up those screws now. He's just getting them snug just to kind of hold that in place. And he's doing the same thing here. You can see he's kind of putting in the screws, getting them where they need to be, and not pushing the top cap in place until those two screws are kind of lined up, so he can make sure that all the remaining screws will line up perfectly back into their original holes in the frame. The butyl tape, again, very sticky stuff, so really the goal, just like putting the glass in place, making sure it's all lined up before you rest it against the butyl tape, essentially what you want to accomplish is once something touches that butyl tape, it doesn't have to move again. So it's all about lining it up before the butyl tape touches something. So here he's just tightening up the screws. We start in the center of the top cap and we tighten that screw first, and then we work our way to the edges, or to the point where they come together. So the last screw should be the one he just did there. And the reason we do that is if you got a little bit of a bend still in the top cap from taking it off, you get that center one tight, and then as you go down from the center to the edges or to the corners, it flattens that out real nice. Sometimes if you start on the edges and you have a little hump in it, when you get that last screw, you got this little hump in the middle. But if you start in the middle, it just flattens it out. You don't end up with any humps. So once he got the top cap on there, he just tightened the middle one, and you could see he was kind of checking to see how much the butyl tape was bulging out to kind of keep the tightness consistent. Then he cleaned the glass, because once you put on the caulking for the corners, it's really hard to clean the glass without touching the caulking with the rag or something. So he wanted to make sure to get it all cleaned up before he did this. And when you tighten those screws, you kind of keep an eye on the butyl tape bulging. You can see it bulging a little bit in between the glass and the top cap there. You use that as an indicator of it being tight enough, and then the rubber washers underneath those screws, you want them bulging out from around the metal washers on top of them. You can kind of see how it's bulging a little bit there. Now he's filling up this kind of crack in between the two pieces of top cap with silicone, and you can kind of see how he got that very front corner there really to touch the glass and both parts of the butyl tape. You know, we don't want any rain sneaking into that little tiny corner. And now he's putting a nice thick bead on there. It's a little, some people feel it's a little gaudy looking this way, like why make such a large bead? But the reality is this thing will be sometimes sitting in the sun on the south side of your house, taking the UV damage year after year after year. And even if you have the best quality 50-year caulk, it's not going to last 50 years in those conditions. So we make it a little thicker, just so that you're able to have like almost a sacrificial layer, like a 1/16 of an inch of the outside of the caulking can get dry and brittle and still maintain some good caulking underneath it. So instead of a nice thin clean layer that looks nice, we put a little bit of a thicker layer on here that's just going to last. This is one of the biggest areas of problems if people are neglecting their maintenance and checking on this, is that these will get dry and crack a little bit, so we put nice thick beads on to prevent that. So here's the inside, glass this side in, as you can see, or glaze this side in. So now I take off the sticker after it's in and clean the inside as well, obviously, and there you go. It's all done and looks good, and this will last 50 years if that maintenance is maintained. Any questions? Here's our phone number and our email, and thank you very much.